My mother had just nervously reached for another piece of the glistening roasted chicken. Before she could bring it to her mouth, my husband, Thomas, slammed his hand down, knocking the fork from her grasp. The clatter of silverware on the tiled floor echoed dryly in the cold silence. He snarled, each word a dagger to my heart. "Haven't you had enough? You old freeloader." In that instant, I stood up, walked straight to our bedroom, unlocked a drawer, and pulled out a file no one in this family had seen in 3 years. In a single fateful afternoon, I would make him and his noble family bow their heads and repay every cent they'd always claimed was for my upkeep, along with a document I knew he would never dare to sign. It was late May, and a sudden shower had just washed over Paris, cleansing the city of its muggy heat and leaving a rare chill in the air. I stood in the kitchen, turning a piece of golden-brown fish in the pan, a strange sense of unease washing over me. The doorbell rang, cutting through my thoughts. Wiping my hands on my apron, I hurried to the door. Through the peephole, I saw a familiar, frail figure huddled under the awning, clutching a faded floral tote bag. It was my mother, Elena. My heart tightened. My mother, a woman who had toiled her entire life for her family, whose gentle smile was etched with the fine lines of time and hardship. "Mum, why didn't you call? I would have picked you up from the station," I said, swinging the door open, my voice a mixture of joy and sorrow. She looked up, her familiar, tender smile appearing, but her eyes held a hint of hesitation. "Oh, I just took a cab. It's no trouble, dear." Her words, "no trouble," made my throat clench. I knew what she was afraid of. I took the heavy bag from her hands. Inside were fresh strawberries, a few pears, and a container of the beef stew I loved. All simple things from her small garden, yet filled with her immense love. As we entered the living room, the warm atmosphere instantly froze. My mother-in-law, Beatrice, sat on the gleaming leather sofa, a cup of tea in hand. She glanced up, her eyes flicking from my mother's worn shoes to her graying hair, and then to the bag of produce in my hands. Without a word of greeting, she sneered, "Well, look who it is. What brings you all the way out here in this weather?" My mother flinched, her thin hands twisting together nervously. "Hello, Beatrice," she murmured. "I just missed Clara so much." My sister-in-law, Sophie, who was scrolling through her phone, looked up and scoffed. "This house is already so crowded. Can't we get a moment's peace?" I bit my lip to stop a sharp retort. Taking my mother's hand, I forced a smile. "Mum, don't mind them. Come and sit down. I'll make you some warm tea." I led her to a simple armchair in the corner, the only non-designer piece of furniture, a place I knew she'd feel safest. Seeing her small, hunched figure, my heart ached. This woman who gave me everything now had to endure such contempt in her own daughter's home. And my husband, Thomas, the man I once loved, he was in his study. He heard everything, of course. But as always, he chose silence. His silence was a form of complicity, a quiet approval of his family's cruelty. I took a deep breath, telling myself to endure for the sake of peace, for the child growing in my belly. But I didn't know that my patience was the very thing feeding the monster in this family. The dinner that evening was heavy with unspoken tension. I had cooked Thomas's favorite dishes, roasted chicken, dauphinoise potatoes, and a fresh salad. I filled a plate for my mother, giving her the best piece of chicken. "Eat up, Mum. You must be hungry after your journey." She nodded, picking at her food timidly, as if afraid of making a sound. The only noise was the clinking of cutlery. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law ate with a dramatic flair that highlighted their displeasure. Finally, Thomas came down. He sat, avoiding my mother's gaze, and ate like a machine, without a word of greeting. To him, my mother was invisible. And then it happened. My mother, perhaps finding the chicken to her liking, or maybe just wanting to finish quickly, reached for another piece. At that moment, Thomas looked up, his eyes blazing like a cornered animal. He swept his hand out, knocking the fork from my mother's hand. Clang! The sound shattered the silence. Then he roared the words I will never forget. "Haven't you had enough, you old freeloader?" Time stopped. My ears buzzed. I saw my mother's eyes widen in shock, then fill with a deep, humiliating pain. Her frail shoulders began to shake. Across the table, my mother-in-law smirked with satisfaction. Sophie giggled into her hand. And my husband, after his cruel outburst, simply resumed eating as if he had just commented on the weather. In that moment, I knew my limit had been reached. I didn't cry. Strangely, the tears wouldn't come. Perhaps they had all dried up during my years of marriage in this house. Or perhaps the rage burning inside me had incinerated them all. I just stood there, staring at Thomas, the man I called my husband. His face was still contorted with anger, but I saw a flicker of unease in his eyes, as if even he was surprised by his own venom. My mother was frozen, her hands gripping the table, trying to hold herself together. It was not shame that made her cry, but a broken heart for her daughter. "Mum, we're leaving." My voice was quiet but firm, cutting through the oppressive silence. Just 3 words, but they held all my resolve. It was not a suggestion, it was a command. Beatrice, snapping out of her stupor, slammed her plate down. "Leaving? Where do you think you're taking her in this weather? You are a wife in this house. You have to know your place. Your mother made a mistake, and she should stay and be corrected." I turned to her, for the first time in 3 years, looking my mother-in-law directly in the eye without a trace of fear. Corrected? I laughed, a cold, bitter sound. My mother has done nothing wrong. The one who is wrong is your son, is this entire family. And as for my place, the first rule of being a decent human being is to respect your elders, especially the one who gave birth to your wife. If you can't even manage that, don't talk to me about my place. Beatrice was speechless with fury, her face red, her finger trembling as she pointed at me. You dare lecture me." Sophie chimed in, her voice shrill. "You're being dramatic. Thomas just misspoke. Your mother has eaten here plenty of times. What's the big deal?" I ignored her, my eyes locked on Thomas. I saw him flinch. He avoided my gaze and mumbled to his mother, "Mum, let's just talk about this calmly." But his cowardly attempt to smooth things over only disgusted me more. He didn't see his error. He just wanted the problem to disappear quickly. Without another word, I went to my mother and gently helped her up. Her hands were ice cold and still trembling. I held them tightly, trying to give her some of my strength. "Mum, let's go. This place isn't worthy of you for another second." I led her out the door, ignoring the torrent of curses and shouts behind me. As the heavy oak door shut, I felt a massive weight lift from my shoulders. The rain had subsided to a fine mist. I didn't know where we would go, but I knew one thing for certain. I would never return to that hell. I took my mother to the small flat I had bought with my own savings before my marriage. It was my secret sanctuary, my escape route. During the taxi ride, my mother was silent, staring out the window as tears streamed down her wrinkled cheeks. I knew she was blaming herself. "Mum, don't think about it. It's not your fault," I said softly, taking her hand. "The fault is mine, for being too weak, for letting them trample all over you time and again." Back at the flat, I made her a warm cup of tea. She sat on the sofa, the warmth of the mug doing little to chase away the cold in her heart. Maybe I should just go back to the village, dear," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "I'm only causing you trouble." I put my hand on her shoulder and shook my head firmly. "No, Mum. From now on, you'll stay here with me. I won't let anyone hurt you again." Then, I stood up and walked into the bedroom. I opened the bottom drawer of my wardrobe and pulled out a dusty blue file. This wasn't just a collection of papers. It was proof of my sacrifice, evidence of Thomas's deceit, and, most importantly, my only weapon. I had hoped I would never have to use it. I had hoped my love and patience could change them. But I was wrong. With selfish, cruel people, only the cold, hard truth bound by ink on paper could make them see. I opened the file, my heart strangely calm. There was no more pain, only a steely resolve. "Thomas, you destroyed everything with your own hands, and now you will pay the price." I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in a long time. A deep, calm male voice answered. Hello? I took a deep breath. Alex, it's Clara. I need your help. Do you remember the investment agreement you drafted for Thomas and me 3 years ago? Alex, my old university friend, and now a sharp lawyer, paused for a second before replying with a question that I knew would unleash a storm upon my husband's family. Of course, Clara. Alex's voice was steady through the phone. I have the original copy right here in my office. Why? Don't tell me that special clause has been triggered. A bitter smile touched my lips. The special clause. The perfect legal trap I had almost forgotten in the haze of love. Yes, it has, I said, my voice firm. I need you to prepare all the necessary paperwork. I'll be at your office tomorrow morning. After the call, I returned to the living room. My mother had fallen asleep on the sofa. I gently covered her with a blanket and sat beside her, my mind drifting back 3 years. I wasn't always a housewife. I was the head of sales for a major import-export company, an independent woman with a promising future. I met Thomas at a business seminar. He was a young man with big dreams of starting a software company, but no capital. I was drawn to his intelligence and the passion in his eyes when he spoke of his ambitions. We fell in love quickly and deeply. Thomas was brilliant, but he was broke. He knocked on every investor's door and was rejected every time. Seeing him so dejected, I made a decision. I would be his first and only investor. I gave him my entire life savings, over 200,000 euros. But it wasn't a gift. I might have been in love, but I wasn't a fool. I had Alex draft a detailed investment contract. It clearly stated that my 200,000 euros constituted a 60% share in the company. Thomas's contribution was his expertise, giving him the remaining 40%. The crucial part, however, was a special clause Alex had advised me to include for my own protection. It stipulated that during our marriage, if Thomas committed any act of violence, infidelity, or seriously insulted the dignity of me or my immediate family, I would have the full right to demand the transfer of his 40% share to me for a symbolic price of €1. Furthermore, I would have the right to unilaterally terminate the marriage without any division of assets generated from the company's profits. When I gave Thomas the contract to sign, I was clear. I trust you, but I need an assurance of respect. I can give you everything I have, but I cannot accept a man who doesn't respect me and my family. He took my hands, his eyes sincere. Clara, you have my word. I will always love and respect you and your parents as my own. He signed it without hesitation. Perhaps he truly meant it then. Or perhaps he was just desperate for the money. His company took off. The software he developed was a huge success. Money poured in. We bought a large villa and luxury cars. A year later, we had a grand wedding. On our wedding day, he stood on the stage, held my hand and said, "Thank you to the woman who believed in me when I had nothing. I will spend my life making you happy." I cried, believing I was the luckiest woman in the world. But things changed when his mother, Beatrice, moved in with us. She never liked me, thinking her brilliant son deserved better. She criticized everything I did. At first, Thomas defended me, but her constant nagging wore him down. He started to see things her way. He became irritated when I came home late from work, when I spent more time on my career than on him. "The company is stable now," he'd say. "You don't have to work so hard. Why don't you quit and stay home? We can start a family." I hesitated. I loved my job, my independence, but I also loved him and wanted a family. I finally agreed. I gave up my career to become the housewife he and his mother wanted. I clipped my own wings, a decision I would come to regret bitterly. Once I was no longer earning, my position in the house changed. I was no longer a partner, but a dependent, an unpaid maid. And Thomas was no longer the man I loved. He became arrogant, dismissive, and controlling. He had forgotten that everything he had was built on my money and sacrifice. He had forgotten his promise. He had forgotten the special clause. And today, I would remind him of everything. The next morning, I left my mother with a close friend and drove to Alex's office. Everything was ready. All I had to do was sign. As I picked up the pen, a thought struck me. Did Thomas really forget? Or did he just arrogantly believe I would never dare to use it? I remembered the look in his eyes yesterday. No remorse, only contempt. No, he hadn't forgotten. He just didn't care anymore. In his eyes, I was just a housewife living off his money, with no power. That contract was probably just a piece of worthless paper from the past to him. The thought steadied my hand. I signed all the documents without a second thought. The demand to enforce the contract clause, the divorce papers, the power of attorney for my lawyer. It was done. There was no going back. "Are you sure about this, Clara?" Alex asked, his expression concerned. "Once this is filed, there's no turning back. His company, your marriage, it will all be over." I looked at him, my voice calm. "I've been thinking about this for 3 years, Alex. What needs to fall apart should fall apart. I can't live in a marriage where my mother is insulted, and I'm treated like a piece of furniture." Leaving the law firm, I drove to a riverside cafe and ordered a black coffee, something I hadn't had in a long time. The bitterness was clarifying. The small, painful cuts from the past 3 years began to connect. It started with Beatrice's snide remarks. "Clara has it so easy, just staying home all day while my son works himself to the bone." At first, Thomas would defend me, but his defense grew weaker and weaker. Once, his company had a major contract on the line with an international client who required a presentation in English. Thomas and his team were struggling. I stayed up for 2 nights, using all my old skills and experience to craft the perfect presentation for him. It was a resounding success. That night, at a celebratory dinner, Thomas proudly told his family how I had helped him. His mother, instead of being impressed, scoffed. A CEO who needs his wife to write a presentation for him. How embarrassing. The worst part was Thomas's reaction. After a moment of awkwardness, he just laughed it off and changed the subject. That was the first time I cried, feeling utterly disrespected. When I confronted him, he just sighed and said, "She's old, Clara. Just ignore it for the sake of peace." Ignore it. I had to ignore so much. I ignored his mother snooping in our room, his sister using my expensive bags without asking. The breaking point was always my mother's visits. Beatrice treated the simple, heartfelt gifts from my mother's garden as if they were trash, often ordering the housekeeper to throw them away. Once, my mother had a bad back, and I wanted her to stay for a few days. Beatrice threw a fit. "This is a house, not a hotel. Who is going to serve her?" And what did Thomas do? He suggested I check my mother into a hotel. A hotel. I had to lie to my mother about electrical repairs in the house to save her from the hurt. Seeing her small figure walking into that soulless hotel room, my heart broke. I asked myself why I was living this miserable life. For a man who had sworn to protect me. The coffee was finished, but the bitter taste remained. I had no regrets about my decision. I only regretted not doing it sooner. I stood up, ready to face the storm. I wouldn't just take back what was mine. I would make them understand that every person has a breaking point, and the silence of a woman should never be mistaken for weakness. But first, I had one more thing to do. Something that would ensure Thomas and his family spent the night in pure, unadulterated fear. Instead of driving back to my flat, I turned the car towards the villa I once called home. I wasn't going back to argue or pack my things. I was going to deliver a silent, powerful message. I parked a little down the street and walked, using my own key to silently let myself in. The house was quiet. They were probably upstairs. Perfect. I went straight to Thomas's study, my former library. On the wall where my bookshelves used to be, now hung his awards and accolades. The largest frame held a picture of him accepting a Young Entrepreneur of the Year award. I walked to his large mahogany desk and placed a single item on it, right next to his sleek laptop, a photocopy of the blue file. I had made a copy for this very moment. I knew his routine. He would come in here after dinner to check his emails. He would see the logo of Alex's law firm. He would read the title, Company Capital Contribution Agreement, and then he would flip to the last page, to the special clause, and his own signature. I smiled. A cold, emotionless smile. This was just the beginning. Before leaving, I did one last thing. I went to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. It was stocked with fresh food I had bought just the day before. I took out the container of beef stew my mother had brought, untouched. I held it, feeling the chill. This was my mother's love, dismissed and disrespected. I took it with me. I would not leave anything of my mother's in this tainted place. I left as quietly as I had arrived. I knew that in just a few hours the house would be in turmoil. That evening, I cooked a simple dinner for my mother. We ate in the small, cozy kitchen of my flat. She seemed to have recovered her spirits. Seeing her smile, I knew I had done the right thing. Around 9 p.m., my phone vibrated. The screen showed my husband. I smirked. He'd seen it. I rejected the call. He called again, and again, nearly 20 times. Then the frantic text started. "Clara, where are you? We need to talk. What is this? What are you doing? I'm sorry. I was wrong. Please come home. Clara, pick up the phone. Don't take this too far." I read them all without a flicker of emotion. Sorry? It was too late for sorry. The insult to my mother could not be erased with a simple apology. I turned off my phone. I wanted him, his mother, and his sister to spend the night stewing in their fear and uncertainty. They needed to feel the powerlessness I had endured for 3 years. And I knew that when they received the official documents from my lawyer in the morning, their real nightmare would begin. But I underestimated Beatrice. She would not go down quietly. She was about to do something even more cruel and shameless than I could have imagined. The next morning, as my mother and I were having breakfast, the doorbell buzzed incessantly, accompanied by loud banging. I looked through the peephole. It was Beatrice and Sophie, their faces masks of fury. I didn't open the door. "Who is it, dear?" my mother asked, worried. "It's nothing, Mum. Just some salespeople. I'll handle it," I reassured her. The banging grew louder, and Beatrice's shrieks echoed in the hallway. "Clara, you coward. Open this door! Are you trying to ruin my son?" She was creating a scene, trying to use public pressure against me. I calmly called building security. "Hello, this is apartment A 1208. There are 2 individuals causing a disturbance outside my door." Within minutes, 2 security guards arrived. The shouting subsided, replaced by Beatrice's indignant protests. "I'm his mother. I've come to see my daughter-in-law." The guard's voice was firm. "Ma'am, the resident has requested our assistance. Please refrain from causing a disturbance." Beatrice then switched tactics, collapsing to the floor in a heap of theatrical sobs. "Oh, the injustice. My daughter-in-law has locked me out. She's turned my son against me." It was a masterful performance. I had to give her that. But I was no longer a part of her audience. I opened the door. Everyone froze. Beatrice stopped her wailing mid-sob. I addressed the security guards first. "Thank you for coming so promptly. I know these women, but we are having a private disagreement. I do not wish to see them. Could you please escort them out?" Then I turned my cold gaze upon Beatrice. "If you want to act, Mother, please find a more appropriate stage. You are only embarrassing your son." You dare," she stammered, scrambling to her feet. "Oh, I dare," I cut her off. "Instead of making a fool of yourself here, you should go home and read the documents I sent you very carefully. After you've done that, if you still feel like causing a scene, I'll be happy to oblige." I then looked at Sophie. "And you, Sophie, you should start worrying about your own future. Because soon, the credit card you so carelessly spend and the comfortable life you enjoy will be gone." My words hit them like a physical blow. Sophie's face went pale. Beatrice looked as if she wanted to say more but thought better of it. The guards politely but firmly led them away. I closed the door, my heart pounding. The first confrontation was a victory, but I knew this was far from over. And Thomas, he was still silent. His silence was more unnerving than his mother's hysterics. He was planning something. I had to be ready. I never imagined their next attack would target my greatest vulnerability. That afternoon, I received a call from an unknown number. It was a woman's voice, hesitant. "Is this Clara, Elena's daughter?" I confirmed. This is your mother's neighbor from the village. She collapsed this morning. She's at the local clinic. You need to come home right away." My blood ran cold. "What? My mother is here with me." "No, dear," the woman insisted. "She came back this morning. I saw her myself. A trap. They wanted to lure me away, to separate me from my mother so they could get to her." My heart hammered against my ribs. What were they planning to do to a helpless old woman? I had to stay calm. I rushed to the living room. My mother was watching television. "Mum," I said, forcing a smile. "I have to pop out for a bit, an old work thing. Will you be okay here alone? Lock the door and don't open it for anyone, unless I call you first." She nodded, unsuspecting. I didn't leave. I went down to the garage and sat in my car, waiting. My phone was recording. 15 minutes later, a familiar black Mercedes pulled up. Thomas got out, along with his mother, sister, and a rough-looking man I didn't recognize. My heart leaped into my throat. What were they planning? I wanted to call security, but I needed to know their plan. I had to take the risk. They entered the building. Minutes stretched into an eternity. They didn't come back out, which meant they had gotten upstairs. My patience snapped. I bolted from the car and ran for the elevator. As the doors opened on my floor, I was met with the sound of furious pounding and shouting. "Open the door, you old hag. We know you're in there." It was Thomas's voice. My Thomas, calling my mother an old hag. The strange man was trying to pry open the lock with a crowbar. "Stop!" I screamed. They all turned, stunned to see me. Thomas quickly composed himself. "Clara, thank God you're back. Your mother locked herself in and wouldn't answer. We were so worried." I laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "Worried? So worried you brought a locksmith with a crowbar? Stop the act, Thomas. I know your entire pathetic plan." Beatrice lunged at me. "You little witch! You tricked us!" I dodged her slap. "The only tricksters here are you," I shot back. "You faked an emergency to lure me away so you could come here and terrorize my mother. Are you even human?" The man with the crowbar tried to slip away, but I pointed at him. "You stay right there. Attempting to break and enter is a crime." I turned back to Thomas, my voice filled with disgust. "I never thought you could sink this low, Thomas. What were you going to do to my mother?" He stared at the floor, ashamed. Beatrice, however, was defiant. "We just wanted to talk some sense into her. She's the one who raised a daughter who's trying to steal her husband's company." "His company?" I laughed again, the sound echoing in the hallway. "Beatrice, this building, that car, and the company your son is so proud of, it's all mine. With a single signature, I can leave your precious son with nothing. Absolutely nothing." My words were a bombshell. Beatrice and Sophie stared, speechless. Thomas looked up, his face a mask of disbelief. "What are you talking about? The company is yours." "Yes, mine," I said, spitting the words out. "Have you forgotten the contract you signed 3 years ago? The special clause? Did you really think a woman with 10 years of business experience would hand over her life savings without any legal protection?" The hallway fell silent. Thomas's face drained of all color. He remembered. He finally remembered the fatal trap he had willingly walked into. He knew the game was over, but he didn't know the worst was yet to come. Thomas's face was ashen. The memory of the contract, of the clause he had willfully ignored, now came crashing down on him. Beatrice, recovering from her shock, found her voice, though it trembled. "You're lying. You're making it up to scare us. The company was built by my son." I just smiled, a smile full of contempt. I took out my phone, opened my emails, and held the screen up for Thomas to see. "Here is the scanned contract, with your signature. Here is the bank statement showing the 200,000 euros I transferred to you. And here," I swiped to another email, "is the confirmation from my lawyer that the enforcement of the clause has been officially filed. Read it, Thomas. Read it and see what you have left." His hands trembled as he looked at the screen. Sweat beaded on his forehead. He knew it was all true. He knew he had lost. Sophie, peering over his shoulder, gasped when she saw the figures. "Brother, is this true?" His silence was her answer. Beatrice's aggression melted into a desperate plea. Clara dear, let's calm down. We can talk about this. We're family, after all. Family? I repeated, my voice dripping with sarcasm. When you brought a man with a crowbar to my door, did you think of family? When your son called my mother a freeloader, where was your sense of family then? It's too late for talk. Just then, my apartment door opened. My mother stood there, her face pale with worry. Seeing her, Thomas scrambled towards her, falling to his knees. Mother, I'm so sorry. I'm a monster. Please forgive me. Ask Clara to give me another chance. He was weeping, not from remorse, but from the terror of losing everything. My mother, a gentle soul, was flustered. I stepped in front of her, shielding her from him. Get up, Thomas. Don't disgust my mother further. Beatrice, her pride wounded by her son's groveling, pushed me aside. You shut up, you venomous snake. You're pushing him to his death. She turned on my mother. And you? Look at what your daughter is doing. Are you happy now? To my astonishment, my mother did not cower. She looked directly at Beatrice, her soft voice carrying an unexpected weight. The only people who have destroyed your son's family are you and him. My daughter has suffered enough. If you cannot give her happiness, then please give her back to me. Her words stunned everyone into silence, even Beatrice. In that moment of shocked quiet, a new voice cut in from the end of the hallway. What is all this commotion? A well-dressed, middle-aged man was approaching. It was Mr. Dubois, the CEO of Vinacorp, the largest and most important partner of Thomas's company. He lived in the penthouse of our building. Thomas's face went from pale to ghostly. He scrambled to his feet, trying to force a smile. Mr. Dubois, just a small family misunderstanding. Mr. Dubois's sharp eyes scanned the scene. He recognized me. Good afternoon, he said, turning to me with a polite nod. Is everything all right? This was my chance. Good afternoon, Mr. Dubois, I said respectfully. I apologize for the disturbance. The thing is, Beatrice interrupted, oozing false charm. Oh, Mr. Dubois, I'm Beatrice, Thomas's mother. It's nothing really. My daughter-in-law is just a bit immature. It's not immaturity, I said, my voice clear and steady, looking directly at Mr. Dubois. It's about my husband, CEO Thomas, calling my mother a freeloader and then bringing his family and this man here to break into my home to intimidate her. I have it all on audio recording. I held up my phone. The effect was instantaneous. Thomas and his family looked horrified. Mr. Dubois' expression hardened. He stared at Thomas, who was trembling, stammering denials. She's lying. She's trying to ruin me. Am I? I challenged. Then why were you just on your knees begging my mother for forgiveness? Shall I play the recording for Mr. Dubois? Thomas fell silent. Mr. Dubois sighed, shaking his head in disappointment. He turned to me. Ma'am, I don't wish to interfere in private matters, but as a business partner, I cannot in good conscience work with a man of such character. Someone who can disrespect his own mother-in-law and treat his wife so cruelly is not trustworthy. Thomas, the contract between Vinacorp and your company. I believe we need to reconsider. It was the final blow. Thomas sagged against the wall, defeated. Losing Vinacorp meant losing 60% of his revenue. It meant bankruptcy. Beatrice pleaded with Mr. Dubois, but he was resolute. In business, character is everything, he said, before turning and walking away. The battle was over. Thomas looked at me, his eyes no longer pleading, but filled with a cold, empty hatred. You've done it, Clara, he hissed. You've destroyed everything. You will regret this. The only one with regrets should be you, Thomas, I replied, my voice devoid of emotion. You destroyed it all yourself. I turned, helped my mother inside, and shut the door on the wreckage of their lives. I knew it wasn't truly over. The hatred in his eyes told me he would seek revenge, but I never imagined how low, how utterly depraved his revenge would be. 2 days later, while I was at Alex's office finalizing the paperwork, I got an unexpected call from Sophie. Her voice was frantic. Clara, you have to come back. Thomas. He's locked himself in his study since yesterday. He won't eat or drink. He's written a suicide note. He says if you don't drop the lawsuit and give him back the company, he'll kill himself. Please, Clara, you're the only one who can talk to him. Another pathetic drama. That's your family's problem, not mine, I said coldly, but a sliver of doubt entered my mind. What if he was desperate enough to do something stupid? I didn't love him anymore, but I didn't want his death on my conscience. Alex, sensing my hesitation, offered to come with me. When we arrived at the villa, the scene was just as I'd pictured. Beatrice was wailing on the lawn. We went straight to the study. The door was locked. After a few unanswered calls, Alex and his driver broke the door down. The scene inside made my blood run cold. Thomas was sitting at his desk, disheveled, surrounded by empty liquor bottles. But it wasn't a suicide attempt that shocked me. It was his computer screen. It was filled with intimate, private photos of me from our marriage, in the bedroom, in the bathroom, some even nude. They were compiled in a folder titled, "A Special Gift," and an email was drafted, ready to be sent to hundreds of my friends, former colleagues, business partners, and tabloid newspapers. The subject line read, "The truth about the successful Clara, the wife who drove her husband to the brink." This was his revenge. Not suicide, but utter humiliation. He wanted to destroy my reputation, to blackmail me into giving everything back. He saw us and smirked, a crazed look in his eyes. "Surprised, my love? You think you can take everything from me? If I go down, I'm taking you with me." I trembled, not with fear, but with pure disgust. Beatrice and Sophie, seeing the photos, quickly joined in. "That's right. If you don't give my son back his company, these will be all over the internet." Alex stepped forward, his voice like ice. "Thomas, do you realize that distributing private, explicit images and blackmail are serious criminal offenses? You could face years in prison for this." Thomas laughed, a wild, unhinged sound. "Prison? I don't care. I have nothing left to lose. But she does. She has her precious reputation. Let's see which she chooses." He looked at me, confident that I would break. He believed a woman's honor was her greatest weakness. He was wrong again. In the suffocating tension of the room, as Thomas and his family waited for my surrender, I took a deep breath. My voice, when it came, was quiet but clear as glass. "Send them." The smirk on Thomas's face froze. "What did you say?" I met his crazed eyes without flinching. I said, "Send them. Yes, I'm scared. I'll be hurt and humiliated. But Thomas, you've forgotten something. You and your family trampled on the honor of my mother. That pain is 1,000 times worse than any naked photo. If releasing these pictures is the price I have to pay to see you, a man with no morals face justice, then I am willing to pay it." I took a step closer. "Go ahead. Let everyone see the kind of man you are. The brilliant entrepreneur who uses his wife's private moments as a weapon. Let's see who will be truly shamed. Me, the victim of a depraved man, or you, the monster." My words hit him like a physical blow. His plan had crumbled. He had played his last, most despicable card, and it had failed. Alex was already on the phone. "Hello, police. I'd like to report a case of blackmail and the threatened distribution of private, explicit material." The mention of the police sent Beatrice into a panic. She lunged for the laptop, but Alex stopped her. "That is evidence, madam. Tampering with it is another crime." Thomas finally broke, slumping into his chair, muttering, "It's over. It's all over." Sophie was sobbing, begging me to take it back. The police arrived shortly after. They took a statement, confiscated the computer, and led a handcuffed, defeated Thomas away. Beatrice fainted. Sophie wept hysterically. The grand villa was a scene of chaos and ruin. The war was over, and I had won. But it was a hollow victory. The price had been my privacy, my dignity, and the last vestiges of the love I once had. I didn't know then that the aftershocks of this war would lead to one final, devastating tragedy. The scandal was immense. The story of the brilliant young CEO arrested for blackmailing his wife with intimate photos was everywhere. My name was dragged through the mud. Some called me a ruthless woman who drove her husband to despair. I was hounded by the press. For a while, I hid, ashamed and broken. But my mother's quiet strength pulled me through. "The truth is the truth, my dear," she would say. "Hold your head high." I gave one interview to a reputable newspaper. I told the whole story, from the beginning, and I provided the evidence. The contract, the bank statements, the audio recordings. Public opinion shifted dramatically. Thomas was now seen as a despicable parasite. His company, already crippled by the loss of the Vinacorp contract, completely collapsed. Partners pulled out, employees resigned. It was over. Beatrice, after selling her own home to pay for lawyers, was left destitute. She wandered the streets, a broken woman, telling anyone who would listen that I had framed her son. No one believed her. Sophie, stripped of her lavish lifestyle, ended up working as a waitress in a small cafe. I saw her once. She looked tired and worn. Our eyes met for a fleeting second before she looked away in shame. It gave me no pleasure. 2 months later, Thomas was sentenced to 5 years in prison. I didn't attend the trial. I sold the villa, restructured the company under a new name, and started a new life with my mother in my small, peaceful flat. For a time, there was peace. My mother seemed happier than she had been in years, but the past was not done with us. One evening, I came home to find my mother distraught. She tried to hide it, but I knew something was wrong. Late that night, I found her in the living room crying silently as she stared at her phone. A text message glowed on the screen. "If you don't want your daughter's reputation completely destroyed, bring 50,000 euros to this address tomorrow. Don't call the police." Attached was a grainy, cleverly photoshopped picture of me coming out of a hotel with an unknown man. It was Beatrice. She was blackmailing my mother, preying on her love for me. She claimed Thomas was being beaten in prison and she needed the money to protect him. My mother, terrified for me, was planning to secretly borrow the money. A furious, protective rage filled me. "Don't worry, Mum," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "I will handle this." The next day, I went to the designated cafe. Beatrice was there, looking older and more bitter than ever. "The money?" she rasped. "There is no money," I said calmly. "I'm here to tell you that your little scheme is over. The man in that photo is Mr. Gerard, a business partner. We were at a restaurant inside that hotel, for a meeting, with our assistants present. The hotel's security cameras will prove it. And I'm sure the police would be very interested in your attempt at blackmail and extortion. Your son is in prison for 5 years. Would you like to join him?" Her face went slack with shock and fear. She knew she was beaten. "Fine," she whispered, her voice filled with venom. "You win." I thought it was over. I relaxed, just for a second. In that second, she snapped. With a wild cry, she threw her cup of hot coffee at me. I jerked back, but the scalding liquid splashed across my shoulder and neck, searing my skin. I cried out in pain. She lunged, her nails like claws, screaming, "I'll kill you! You ruined my family!" The cafe erupted in chaos. People rushed to pull her off me. And then, through the commotion, I saw a familiar figure rush in. It was my mother. She had been so worried. She had followed me. Seeing me being attacked, she ran forward, her only thought to protect her child. "Leave my daughter alone," she cried, pushing at Beatrice. Beatrice, blind with rage, shoved my mother hard. My mother, frail and caught off balance, stumbled backward. Her head hit the sharp corner of a heavy wooden table with a sickening crack. She collapsed to the floor, a pool of blood spreading from beneath her head. "Mum!" The scream tore from my throat. I forgot the burning pain in my shoulder, scrambling to her side, cradling her still form. Her eyes were closed. She wasn't moving. "Mum, wake up. Please, wake up." But there was only a horrifying, unnatural silence. The world dissolved into the sound of sirens and my own heartbroken sobs. My mother was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. The doctors said she had severe head trauma. I sat in the cold, sterile waiting room, a hollow shell of a person. Beatrice was arrested at the scene. Sophie was there too, huddled in a corner, weeping. After what felt like a lifetime, the doctor came out, his face grave. "We did everything we could," he said softly. "I'm so sorry." My world ended. The woman whose honor I had fought so hard to protect, the woman who was my entire world, was gone. I had won the war, but I had lost everything. The assets, the company, the justice, it was all meaningless ash in my mouth. My mother's funeral was a quiet affair on a rainy day. I was numb, a ghost moving through the motions. The following weeks were a blur of grief. Beatrice was sentenced to 15 years in prison for manslaughter. Sophie disappeared, rumored to have retreated to a convent. Their family was utterly destroyed. But it brought me no comfort. It couldn't bring my mother back. One day, Alex visited, bringing with him a letter from Thomas sent from prison. I didn't want to read it, but Alex insisted. In a shaky, barely legible script, he wrote not of excuses, but of a broken man's remorse. "Clara, I know no apology can ever be enough. I was blinded by greed and pride. I let my mother's poison turn me into a monster. Every night I dream of your mother. She smiles her gentle smile and asks if I've eaten. The guilt is a torment I will live with forever. I destroyed the best thing in my life, you, and I took the life of an angel. Please, for her sake, don't let hatred consume you. Live a good life. That will be my greatest punishment." Tears, the first I'd shed since that night at the hospital, fell onto the letter. I wasn't forgiving him. I was crying for the senseless waste, for the mother I had lost. I knew I couldn't live in the shadow of this tragedy forever. My mother wouldn't have wanted that. I sold the company, severing the last tie to that life. With the money, I started a charitable foundation in my mother's name, the Elena Foundation, dedicated to helping women and mothers suffering from domestic abuse. I moved back to the small village where she grew up. I bought a small cottage and planted a garden full of her favorite flowers. I live a quiet life now, running the foundation, finding a sliver of peace in helping others. The scars remain, a constant reminder of the price of pride and the boundless strength of a mother's love. My story is a tragedy, but it is also a testament to the fact that while you can forgive, you must never forget the lines that cannot be crossed, especially when it comes to the honor of those you love. Google search suggestions. Display of search suggestions is required when using grounding with Google search. Learn more. Google logo.